So when you think about what causes a stroke, you probably picture something going wrong deep inside the brain, right? Well, what if I told you that for a huge number of people, the problem actually starts with a silent, slow-building issue right in their neck? Okay, let's dive in and really uncover what's going on here.
And get this, it turns out that about 10% of all strokes are caused by a blockage in a very specific set of arteries, the carotids. I mean, think about that for a second. That's 1 in every 10 strokes tracing back to this one root cause.
Here's probably the best way to wrap your head around this. Your carotid arteries, they're basically the main fuel lines running up to your brain. They deliver all the crucial oxygen-rich blood it needs to function. So you can imagine, if those lines get clogged, the engine, your brain, is in very, very serious trouble.
And here's what those fuel lines actually look like. This image is from an MRI, which gives us this incredibly clear view of these vital channels. You can see them running right up the neck, branching out to feed the entire brain. When these pathways get clogged, well, the consequences can be absolutely devastating. Now, the medical term for this condition is carotid artery stenosis. Stenosis is really just a fancy word for narrowing, and that narrowing is caused by something called atherosclerosis, which is this buildup of fatty plaque. It's almost like rust or corrosion building up on the inside of a pipe. And this right here, this is the central problem we're going to unpack. So, how does this dangerous blockage actually happen? Let's go full-on CSI and investigate the crime scene at a microscopic level to see how this whole thing goes down. You might think it all starts with a big chunk of fat just getting stuck, but that's not it. The very first domino to fall is damage to the super delicate, single-cell thick inner lining of the artery. This lining, it's called the vascular endothelium, is kind of like the gatekeeper. And once it's been damaged over a long period of time, that's when the real trouble begins. So this slide here breaks down the whole cascade of events. After that initial damage we just talked about, bad cholesterol, or LDL, sneaks into the artery wall and basically starts to rust or oxidize. Your body's immune system sees this as a foreign invader and sends in cells to clean up the mess. But this actually just creates this big inflammatory reaction, which builds up into what we call a plaque. Now the real danger is step 4. That plaque can become unstable and rupture, spilling its contents and causing a blood clot that can block off blood flow completely.
And this is the end result. What you're looking at is an angiogram, which is kind of like an X-ray for your blood vessels. That arrow is pointing directly to the stenosis, the physical narrowing caused by all that plaque buildup. You can literally see how that fuel line has been pinched tight. Okay, so we know how the plaque builds up, but what's causing that initial damage to the artery lining in the first place? Well, to figure that out, we need to identify the accomplices in this crime. And when our investigation starts, we find a list of the usual suspects. The research points straight to smoking, high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol as the main culprits, the things you can actually influence. Now, age and sex also play a role, but we're going to focus on the ones we can often do something about. Let's start with smoking. The link here is it's incredibly direct. This quote from the research says it all. The more you smoke, the thicker the wall of your artery gets and the worse the narrowing becomes. It's a dose-dependent relationship, plain and simple.
High blood pressure, or hypertension, acts like an accelerant in this whole process. It puts constant, hammering stress on that delicate inner lining of the artery, which just worsens the damage and speeds up the entire plaque-building process.
And the impact of high blood sugar, or hyperglycemia from diabetes, just as dramatic. For people with diabetes, the risk of having an ischemic stroke, that's the kind caused by a blockage, is 2 to 5 times higher. That's a huge increase in risk. And this is a really crucial point. High cholesterol isn't just some abstract risk factor floating around. It's the literal raw material. That LDL cholesterol is the fatty gunk that gets inside the artery wall and forms the core of these dangerous plaques.
And then, of course, we've got the factors we can't change. The research is clear that the risk of carotid artery stenosis goes up as we get older, and it is more common in men.
All right, now for the verdict. What happens when these accomplices, these risk factors, all team up? This is where the story gets really serious, because these things don't just add up, they multiply each other's effects.
You know, before a major stroke, the body sometimes sends out a critical warning flare. One of the classic ones is called amaurosis fugax. It's a temporary, totally painless loss of vision in one eye, and people often describe it as a curtain coming down. It's caused by a tiny piece of that plaque breaking off and briefly blocking the artery going to the eye. So, if someone experiences that warning sign, that curtain coming down, what does that actually mean for their future?
What is their real risk of going on to have a major, life-altering stroke?
Okay, look at this data. This is absolutely astounding. For someone who has that warning sign but has very few other risk factors, their stroke risk is about 1.8%. But for someone who also has high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, and is a smoker, that risk skyrockets to 24.2%. That's more than a 13-fold increase. It's the combination of all these accomplices that truly determines the final verdict.
And that right there brings us to the most important takeaway from all of this. Your risk isn't just one single number. It's a dynamic, cumulative danger that's built from the combination of all these different health and lifestyle factors. And while you can't change your age, this data shows just how powerfully you can change your future by managing things like blood pressure, cholesterol, and smoking.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Knowing how all these factors build on one another, like accomplices in a crime, to create this dangerous blockage, what's the most important step you can take to protect those vital fuel lines to your brain?